5 Live Formula One.
Good morning and welcome to round 2 of the F1 season. The circus travels to China. The Shanghai International Circuit plays host to the first sprint weekend of the year. So that means just one practice session ahead of us. It's Harry Benjamin with you up in the commentary box. Alongside me is the Formula E driver Sam Bird and the BBC F1 correspondent Andrew Benson. Sam, your first jaunt with us this year on 5 Live. Welcome back. How are we?
I'm very well. It's a pleasure to be here, Harry.
Pleasure to have you. Now we know you've raced around this circuit before.
Here we go.
You've stood on the podium here before, back in your prototype days. You like it? Lewis Hamilton seems to think it's one of the best on the calendar.
Really challenging circuit, this one. I always found it quite low in grip, contrary to what people say. It has been resurfaced though recently. I think it was resurfaced last year in many places. I would expect that initial high grip to have subsided slightly as the tarmac is a little bit older this year, but I'm excited to see what the drivers think of it in this new era of Formula One with the power outputs that they've got now. What's turn 1 going to be like now on entry? Are we going to see people suffering less in sector 3 now because the tyre is going to be under less stress going through turn 1? I think that could be an interesting thing, but difficult circuit, Harry, especially sector 1 with the turn 1, 2, 3 section.
Yeah, you got that 270-degree corner that takes you back on yourself through turn 2 and then out again through turn 3. You've got a couple of heavy braking zones as well, down towards turn 6, and then of course down that long 1.2 kilometre back straight into turn 14. So we come from Melbourne, and I feel like we're all still kind of learning and getting used to seeing the new regulations play out and how that looks in terms of racing and in qualifying as well, because it's two very drastic ways of driving for the cars and the drivers in them. But this is I suppose a better track for that energy harvesting because you have those heavy braking zones, whereas Melbourne, you never really had any big braking events. You're carrying sort of high speed, medium speed all throughout the lap.
This is true, but we also have here an extremely long straight. So we've got a 1.2 kilometre straight from the exit of 13 down towards turn 14. How are the teams going to deploy the energy down that straight? Is it going to be a case of as soon as you get out of 13 using the energy straight away, and then you have a massive dip in top line speed before you get into braking, or do you wait quite a little bit further down the straight before getting to turn 14? So I'm just going to be quite interested to see how teams deploy around this circuit.
Usually, Sam, the most efficient way is to boost at the beginning of the straight.
Absolutely. Yeah. But when we looked at some onboards from Australia, it was quite interesting to see Antonelli boosting earlier than Russell in out of 6 in Australia, but then suffering towards the end of the straight going into turn 9, and Russell then pulling out a couple of tenths, and that couple of tenths was the difference between Antonelli getting pole and not.
Well, I think one of the learnings from Australia that everybody took was just what a great job Russell had done in terms of working out what the optimum form of energy management was. Energy management, it's early doors here, was in that car, and that was basically the 8/10 advantage. A lot of that was on the run, as you say, from 6 to 9, where he was deploying for a lot longer than anybody else, all because he'd worked out exactly what to do with the car. And this is the nature of these new Formula 1 cars. Like it or lump it, like it or loathe it, I should say, probably. And many people loathe it, although that's not a word they're using quite that publicly at the moment. But it was very interesting listening to the drivers yesterday talking about Fernando Alonso started it, and then, as he often does with these things, and then other people picked up on it as well, talking about how a lot of the fast corners that many people would think have defined the character of Formula 1 over the years in terms of, the driving challenge, they're not really corners anymore because the teams will be using them to recover energy.
Just a little bit of action in the pit lane. One of the Alpines is just trying to squeeze itself out. It was Franco Colapinto who just had to be wheeled back because he hasn't made it into the fast lane, but getting dangerously close to Kimi Antonelli's Mercedes, which is lined up nicely as the traffic jam begins with just a few seconds to go then until we get the green light for this one and only hours running of practice, because it is the first sprint weekend of the year, so we'll go straight into qualifying for the sprint a little later on. But blue skies above us, air temperature about 12.2 degrees, track temperature 16 degrees, and the green light is on, and the two Hasses lead a train of cars out onto this Shanghai International Circuit. And for those who are listening and wish to do a sync up, the first one is coming your way now. It's 59 minutes and 39, 38, 37, 36 seconds remaining of the session.
So you guys were obviously out in Melbourne having a super time by the looks of it on your social media channel.
It's a tough life, Sam, but someone's got to do it.
So who, apart from obviously George Russell and Mercedes, who impressed you and who needs to have a good weekend this weekend?
Ooh, well, I was impressed by... I was impressed and disappointed by Ferrari because, I mean, they delivered on their fast starts that we saw in testing. Leclerc from fourth taking the lead by turn one was quite exciting to see, and they had a real good battle at the start of the race, didn't they, for those first sort of 12 to 15 laps. But I feel like that they could have had that could have gone on longer. They could have had a say in the podium order of that race.
Absolutely, and I'm just early little heads up here. I do think that this is the weekend where Lewis Hamilton gets his proper first podium for Ferrari. I'm just going to throw it out there early. Yeah. I think that he really likes this circuit. He's gone well here before. He went well here last year, obviously in the sprint race. Oh, as we see Alpine facing the wrong way. Is that Franco Colapinto?
Yeah, it is
in the Alpine. Already at turn 3 having some issues.
The heroics of the start in Australia for Franco Colapinto, who avoided what could have been an absolutely massive crash with a slow starting Liam Lawson. I don't know if you've seen those replays online, but that was incredible reactions from the Argentine. But he's found himself in a spin on his first outlap from the pit lane, but he's got himself going again.
He has indeed. Sorry, that wasn't at turn 3, that was at turn 9, 10, and going over the curb like that won't have done his floor any good.
So, yes, Ferrari messed up their strategy. There's no question about that. George Russell was talking about that yesterday, about how he thought that it would have been much more difficult to win had one of the, that's the replay of Colapinto's spin. You can hear the tyre squealing on the background on the audio there. Had they pitted one of their cars under the safety car, Russell thought that battle for the lead would have carried on all race, basically, and he didn't think Mercedes would have got the 1-2 that they got. In terms of impressing, for me, Arvid Lindblad was really outstanding in the Racing Bulls. He was unlucky to have a technical problem on his final run in Q3, otherwise I think he would have out-qualified Liam Lawson on his debut, and okay, it's only Liam Lawson, no disrespect to him, but
we're not even like 5 minutes into the session, Benny.
He's not Charles Leclerc, is he? But hugely impressive performance from Lindblad in the race as well, and he looks like he's got a very big future ahead of him. Also, another Red Bull driver who is impressive, Isaac Hadjar, on his first weekend in the main team. Okay, we don't know what Verstappen would have done in qualifying if he'd not had that lock-up on his first lap in Q1 and gone off into the gravel at turn 1, but Hadjar looked like he was pretty close to Verstappen's pace all weekend.
Yeah, he certainly looks closer, doesn't he? The closest teammate to Verstappen in quite a while, as we see. Oh, Lewis Hamilton and Lando Norris nearly coming to blows at the final corner.
It's only an outlap for both of them, but comes to the final corner. Lando Norris slides down the inside. Leclerc's going quite slowly, and then actually there's a bit of a lock-up from the front left of Lando Norris. It's a tight turn-in anyway, and there's very close to contact. Sorry, the other Ferrari. Very close contact there between the two, but they both just about get away with it.
I think there might have been a slight bit of contact.
Do you think there was? I just thought maybe it was a bit of smoke.
It looked like a bit of debris came off one of them. There was a little black bit flying around. I don't really know what Lewis Hamilton was doing there, Sam.
Well, it looks like Lewis Hamilton's locked up because he's got flat spots on his front. So we're now on board with him going down towards turn 5. And that's where the flat spots are.
So it's very similar to what happened to Franco Colapinto on his outlap coming through 8. They're coming into turn 9. So it's downhill braking zone, and then the rears lock and round he goes. Now, in this new era of Formula One, Are we seeing driver error, or are we seeing something there with the electrical deployment?
Brakes locked up.
Yeah, that's so what we're seeing now is you have to recuperate back into the battery, and you do that via the rear axles under braking. Now, if your mapping is not correct, these are the kind of situations that we can see. We saw it with Colapinto. I think we saw it with Max Verstappen in Australia, and Lewis Hamilton there, another prime example of basically the rear axle just not being able to hold the grip with that amount of recuperation going on with the rear axle.
Well, it's a busy start to this one and only practice session. First times coming in, by the way. Pierre Gasly's got the quickest time of 1:37.7, but everyone's still getting up to speed.
But that's that set of tyres done for Lewis. So I don't know where he goes from here with regards to the rest of this free practice. Obviously, he's only got 54 minutes of practice, and then we're into sprint qualifying. So he'll have to chuck another set of tyres on that. But that definitely puts him on the back foot early on in this session. I think I jinxed him, to be honest.
It was after your bold prediction, of course, a year ago, Lewis Hamilton, pole in the sprint and victory in the sprint. The only time he visited any kind of podium last year in his first season of Formula One. And a reminder, just in terms of the tyre allocation for this weekend, it's slightly different when it comes to sprints. So you get 2 sets of hards, 4 sets of mediums, and 6 sets of softs. We're running the C2, the C3, and the C4 hard to soft in that order. This is the sound of Oscar Piastri carving his way through turn 13 and gearing up down that long 1.2 kilometre back straight, which is going to be very intriguing to see how that unfolds for the drivers in qualifying and in the race.
Let's hear when the engine starts to dip. There.
That seems very, very early down the straight, Andrew.
Yeah.
For me, when you heard the note of the engine change.
But just so people understand, that's
exactly
where the engine stops deploying its full energy from the internal combustion and the electrical, and the electrical dies down, and they start to recover energy on the slowing down phase.
That was Piastri.
Carry on.
No, I was going to say that, so with the new regulations, the power split from internal combustion to electric power is 50-50. Teams now have to balance that and basically learn when is best to deploy, and I think teams are still figuring that out. Drivers will work with their engineers. They'll be working hard back at bases on the simulator to try and give the drivers the best feedback on when is best to use that electric power. Now looking at another replay of Lewis Hamilton's spin, and yes, I absolutely think that's on regenerative braking, that's what's happened.
Just to clear that up, Sam, it's the systems that decide all the time where the energy is deployed or not. The only time the driver has control is in this new boost and overtake mode. And just by the way, a point to make about the Ferrari, anyone who was watching pre-season testing will have noticed the kind of crazy design of rear wing, which
the flip-flop wing.
Well, yeah, people call it all sorts of different names. Basically, the top element of the wing, normally on most cars, it just lifts up. The forward flap lifts up, so a gap emerges between the main plane and the flap. But on the Ferrari wing, the flap turns upside down, basically. People call it the Macarena wing.
I don't understand that. Hamilton called it the flip-flop wing.
I think somersault wing is what it really is. That defines what it really does. How does flip-flop work? But anyway, somersault wing is my name for it. Because it just turns upside down, basically. No one else has got it. And obviously Ferrari think it's an efficiency advantage. So
that's going to dump a load of drag and give them so much straight line speeds.
If it works any more effectively than the normal sort of DRS style wing.
The thing about it though is surely in order for the aero to reconnect,
yes,
it
I
will
agree.
take longer. And when we saw the replay of Hamilton spinning, he started to be out of control before the rear wing had properly reattached in its normal high downforce configuration setting.
I completely agree with you, Sam, because if you think about it, Harry, the normal DRS style wing, the flap goes up and then it sort of flops back down almost instantaneously. This thing, it has to rotate on its axis. Now, it's not a complete, I think it's like more than 200 degrees it goes round.
225 I've got.
Thank you. So it looks like 180, but it's actually even more than 180. And you can see it obviously it still happens quite quickly, but it's nowhere near as fast as the DRS flap just dropping down. So that reattachment of the aerodynamics, the downforce, that's obviously going to take longer. So I do agree with Sam. There's a possibility that is related to the rear wing, and we don't know that they're going to commit to it, by the way, but both cars are running it in this session.
Virtual safety car out, by the way. I don't think that's for any stopped car. I think that's FIA testing their system, so everybody slows down. Just over 50 minutes remaining. Russell with the quickest lap time with I think a bit of debris on the track, on the racing line, shimmering in the sunlight as a marshal heads over to get it. Is that on the back straight?
I think it is.
Yeah,
yep.
It's on the actually it's not on the racing line, it's on the inside, but you can get about 3 or 4 cars running wide, alongside each other down there, as we're going to get another look at Gabriel Bortoleto now coming into turn 6, locking up and running wide into the runoff area and carrying on his way in the Audi, and not doing his set of medium tyres any good. Russell with the quickest time, a 1:35.0. Then it's Antonelli, who's also 1:35.0. Nothing between those two. Charles Leclerc in the Ferrari is third. Then comes Pierre Gasly. Oscar Piastri is the top 5. Here's Hadjar.
Going up, man. The traffic is unbearable.
That's Hadjar complaining about the traffic coming through the high-speed bends of turns 7 and 8. Was that one of the Audis? I didn't quite catch who that was.
Yeah, I wasn't sure, but I think it was an Audi, yeah.
So Hadjar then, who's down in 7th, just behind his teammate Verstappen. Behrman's 8th, Norris 9th, with Albon the top 10. Now, let's just run you through the standings, actually. If you weren't with us, it's pretty much the same as the race order was last time out.
George Russell. The same, in fact.
George Russell leads by, guess what, 25 points.
He leads by 25 points. Get it right, Harry.
Doesn't lead by 25. He's got 25 points. Antonelli and Leclerc and Hamilton the top 4, with Norris in 5th. So have we entered now a new era as we get that Norris and Hamilton incident, which was brought up by race control, has been reviewed, no further investigation.
But the key thing there, Harry, is they did call it a collision, so they did hit each other.
Yeah. I'd like to get another look at that, a slow-mo look, but no further investigation on that one. So are we entering now, Sam, a 2014 era of Mercedes dominance? Because they were brilliant in Australia, and they were the pre-season favourites, and 1-2 in qualifying, 1-2 in the race.
Potentially. However, Ferrari looks strong. They should have given Mercedes a real fight. Had they not have, I think, mucked up the strategy. I don't understand how they didn't split strategy when the virtual safety car was out. I think that was a big mistake from them. They had the pace to go with at least Kimi Antonelli and give Mercedes a run for their money. So I think that right now it's two manufacturers right at the front. I don't think we've seen what Red Bull can do fully, because obviously Hadjar had the issue in the race. Max Verstappen was coming from the back. I think McLaren have some homework to do. They've got the Mercedes power unit, but I don't think they fully understand how to maximize it just yet, and I think they'll come closer to the limit and the top of the pace and the pecking order as the first few races unravel. So I don't think it's quite as clear-cut as what we saw in 2014, as we actually see a Racing Bulls off at turn 14 on the inside. Looks like a terminal failure for, who is that? That's Arvid Lindblad there on the inside at turn 14.
Yeah, yellow flag is out. Lindblad, who we were just speaking about a few moments ago, massively impressive in his first race as a Formula One driver, has stopped out on the circuit, the 18-year-old, and we're getting an onboard look at him now. He's found himself behind the barriers, and that is terminal. He's getting out of the car, and this is going to be a tough weekend now for him, because, I mean, a sprint is a hard weekend anyway. Your first one as a rookie driver, and to not get any practice before you're thrown into sprint qualifying, it's going to be a busy weekend for Lindblad.
It's not the end of the world, because I mean the sprint is the sprint, right? And you can see a lot of the teams are going to be using the sprint as a test session this weekend. You can change the setup after that before you go into Grand Prix qualifying. We're getting a replay. Smoke coming into the cockpit down the back straight. That's not good. looks like some kind of reliability problem in the engine bay, whether it's engine related or something else, we don't know. But
so this is interesting because obviously Racing Bulls run the Red Bull powertrains in partnership with Ford, which looked pretty good reliability wise in pre-season testing. And then suddenly in the race in Australia, you had Hadjar with the problem during the race, having to pull to the side. You've now got this issue. We don't know what it is yet, but certainly a lot of smoke billowing from the cockpit of Arvid Lindblad's Racing Bulls. He's now out of the car and on the back of a scooter, making his way back to the paddock. So no Lindblad now. So as impressive as the Red Bull powertrains and Ford partnership has been to kick-start their foray into that world, it's not completely bulletproof by the looks of things.
Certainly not. So on your question to Sam, Harry, I think Ferrari, there's no question they messed up the structure. It was a bit touch and go for Leclerc. He was leading the race when the virtual safety car came out around about lap 12, I think it was, and he was just coming up to the pit entry. And if they'd been quick, they could have got him in, but it would have been it was a really, really tight call. They could certainly have pitted Hamilton. And the thing was, the VSC went on for a couple of laps, and they could have pitted Leclerc the next time around, and he wouldn't have lost any more time than he already had, because the pace, of course, of the field is controlled. They were waiting for a later VSC, and there was one, to be fair to them. But the problem was that happened because Valtteri Bottas stopped in the pit lane entry, and the pit lane entry was closed as a consequence, so they were a little bit unlucky on that. Having said that, everybody else pretty much went for the VSC stop. And it's easy to say, well, we were waiting for a second one, but the thing is, you don't know you're going to get a second one. You have to take the safety car when you get it. And to not do that with one car is absolutely inexcusable, I think. And Fred Vasseur brushed it off, the team principal, in his news conference afterwards, as he would. Ferrari are not very good at accepting error when they do it. Most teams will admit, oh yeah, we need to look at that again, or admitting straight away, we screwed up. Ferrari tend not to do that as a company. Whether that reflects how they deal with things internally, I don't know. But they certainly messed up. But in terms of performance, Mercedes are very clear that Ferrari could have raced them for the win in Australia. I think Russell felt he probably had the pace advantage in the race, but we won't know. And what's interesting to point out is that Leclerc took the lead at the start from a great start. So what we're seeing with Ferrari is they've got great starts. They can potentially get into the lead from if they qualify not on pole, they can still be in the lead at the first corner, albeit Russell had some energy issues at the start, which is another topic we could get into technically as the practice goes on if we get a bit bored. But he got into the lead, and yes, Russell got back past him, but then they had that sort of do-si-do with the sort of boost and overtake modes, and Leclerc ended up in front, and Russell couldn't get past him. So track position is still important, even with these new hybrid power, these new sort of 50-50 hybrid powertrains. So they're very much in it. McLaren have not only got an understanding gap on the Mercedes engine. Basically, they've been given the engine and not been given any information on how to run it, and how to run it makes a big difference on performance. Fair enough, they're a customer. And the car's a bit overweight, so it's a bit slow around the corners as well. So they've got a bit of work to do on both, on an understanding and the technical package thing. Because I think the key thing to say about the Mercedes car is also a very good car. Red Bull, we're not quite clear what their potential is yet. So I think it's worrying. To answer your question about is it 2014 again, it has the potential to be 2014 again, but on the face of it so far, I wouldn't want to commit to it being that bad yet. And I think Sam's right. I think there's potential for it to be not like that. What I would say as a final point, though, if you're expecting Ferrari to close a gap on somebody over the course of a season, that's historically something they're quite poor at. Usually they lose ground relative to the opposition, not gain it.
Mercedes, so when I was there from 2010 to 2014, we started work on the 2014 regulation engine in 2011, Harry. So good 3 years before the car
because Mercedes were just sort of 6th and 7th, weren't they, in those years?
Yeah, but the FIA were coming to Mercedes going, what are your findings? What do you think? How can we improve the regs? What do we need to do? Mercedes just manipulated the regulations so that it suited them, suited their engine, and they came out the blocks in 2014 and annihilated everybody for multiple years, didn't they? Nobody really got close. I think Ferrari, with Vettel on board, came close. What was it, in 2017, 2019?
17, 18. They should have won the championship at least in one of those years.
Yeah, but it took 2-3 years for Ferrari to catch up. I think it's going to be closer this year. It's early days, but I think it's going to be closer.
It is early days. We're only at round 2. But what I think is encouraging, and I think Lewis Hamilton picked up on this in one of the media pens coming into this weekend, was that it's actually quite encouraging to see Ferrari bringing this rear wing and bringing that kind of development and committing to it early in the year. We saw a glimpse of it in testing. I think we only saw it on one day. They brought it to a sprint weekend as well, so they only get one practice session to really gauge it properly. And yes, I know we've got this gigantic long back straight, so if you're going to bring it anywhere, you probably want to try out in China. But I think that's encouraging to see Ferrari developing that early doors and committing to it, something that we have not seen anyone else do.
No, absolutely. But again, with Ferrari, I'm surprised they haven't split the rear wings across the cars. Both Charles Leclerc and Lewis Hamilton currently running the flip-flop rear wing in this session. Now, if they decide that they don't like it, maybe Lewis Hamilton, after that the spin down at turn number 6, he might go, look, it's not reattaching the aero fast enough in the braking zones. They've then got to go straight into the sprint qualifying with a completely different rear wing that is untried and untested around this circuit. So I'm a little bit surprised that if they're going to try something so drastic as the flip-flop rear wing, that one of the cars isn't on the, let's call it, more standard.
Well, we'll keep an eye on it. 38 minutes and 39 seconds remain. It's George Russell quickest with a 1:34.169, half a second clear of Charles Leclerc in the Ferrari. Antonelli is third with Ollie Behrman's Haas up in fourth. Then comes Norris in fifth, 1.4 seconds adrift. Gasly, Lawson, Hadjar, Verstappen and Piastri, the top 10, everyone on the medium tyre. Then it's Hamilton, Colapinto, Ocon, Albon, Bortoletto and Lindblad now out of this session, the top 16, with Alonso, Perez, Hulkenberg, Bottas, Stroll in 21st, and Carlos Sainz, who looks like he's got some issues in that Williams, has only been out once and I think comes straight back into the pits again. So he had issues last weekend as well in that Williams. Reliability proving an issue, particularly on Sainz's car. No laps on the board yet. As we're getting a nice slow-mo replay of the flip-flop wing in action, as I think that's Charles Leclerc coming round the final corner.
It's somersault. I'm sorry, it's a somersault wing.
No one said Macarena is the thing going round most, and I cannot get on board with that.
I think Ted Kravitz made that up.
Did he?
Ted, I love Ted to pieces, but honestly, he's not.
I'm going with what Hamilton called it as the official Ferrari.
Yeah, fair enough. Yeah.
But look at how long it takes to reattach into its normal position. It's like it's double the amount of time as everybody else's rear wing. I'm sure it might gain you time in a straight line and be less draggy in a straight line, but surely when you reattach initially under braking, that's got to cost you a little bit of lap time in that area of the corner.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to talk to the drivers about that. I'm sure they're not going to talk about it on the record, but we were just watching the Aston Martin go around with Fernando Alonso at the wheel. He's on the soft tyre, unlike everybody else pretty much on the mediums.
At least he's out there.
He's out there. But what I want to see, I was thinking as we were watching him, there's been all sorts of replays from Australia, Franco Colapinto's great escape from avoiding the back of Liam Lawson's Racing Bulls at the start, and so on and so forth. What we've not seen is Fernando Alonso's first lap. He went from 17th to 10th. I want to see an onboard of that, Sam.
I've seen the first 3 corners of his, and he's so good, isn't he, of just putting the car in the right place at the right time. And yes, he was on the soft tyre and people around him were on the medium or the hard, but
7 places.
It was impressive, very, very impressive, as we see the McLaren of Lando Norris getting a little bit unstuck and very, very sideways in the middle of turn 1 and then running wide and off the circuit. Turn 1 in China, Harry, is one of the most challenging, difficult corners to get right consistently anywhere on the Formula 1 grid.
I could never do it on the F1 game. It was so difficult to get the braking point right and to carry the momentum round. So tricky.
Well, that's why you're in here and they're out there.
Exactly.
What does that say about me?
Yeah, I didn't want to bring that up. Moving on. Actually, just to come on to that Aston Martin point, I mean, it is good to see them out there. Stroll's he's on 7 laps. Fernando Alonso's done 6 laps. They're both on the soft tyre. They ran Australia as pretty much a test session, didn't they? In and out of the pits. And Stroll did see the checker flag, although about 15 laps down.
Look, and it's going to be like this for quite some time, I think, for Aston Martin. Adrian Newey's come out and admitted, look, the first bit of the season is going to be a challenge. They've got, is it 2 battery units remaining?
They're being a bit coy on that this weekend, but they did say that in Australia.
So apparently that's the case. They think they understand what is happening with the vibrations, and part of that could be a little bit better.
No, they think they can understand. They've worked out a way to isolate the battery from the vibration. What they don't know is why the vibrations are happening, and I just cannot get my head around that. They say they didn't see the vibrations on the dyno, the engine test bed, but as soon as they put the engine in the car, they got the vibrations. Well, it's not like the vibrations were suddenly there because they put the engine in the car. They were already there. They just only noticed them when the resonant, when it went into the chassis and started vibrating the driver's hands off. I remain gobsmacked as to how Honda have got themselves in this position again at the start of another set of regulations 10 years after they did, more than 10 years after they did it the first time. It's really unacceptable for a company of that size and quality. Their expertise in engines is as good as anybody's in the world, and yet here we are again. It's like deja vu. And Fernando Alonso, he's putting on a brave face publicly. I cannot imagine how much pain he must be feeling inside privately to be going through this again. And I could tell you some stories about the previous time with McLaren Honda, which would make it, I think, they do mean that it's going to be difficult for him to have any kind of trust or faith that Honda are going to get it right in the near term.
In what is he now, 44, and what could be his final year in Formula One, it's not what you want to see him languishing at the back doing testing laps, just trying to complete a Grand Prix distance.
The problem for him is he's making a decision about whether he sticks around for another year, because he's going to be 45 at the end of July. Is, yes, on one level it would be awful to go out like this, right? Matt Bishop, actually, the former McLaren communications director, who's now a journalist again, he's written an excellent column on this situation in Motorsport magazine this week. Well, it's not in Motorsport magazine, it's on various news services as well, but anyway, it's very, very good. You'd be tempted, if you were Alonso, as long as you feel like you're still up to it, and he says that he does, to give it another go. But I think the problem for that decision for him is going to be, what confidence can he possibly have that Honda are going to turn it around, given that last time it took them 6 years to get it right, and even then they only got it right when after they decided to pull out, and an engine that they had designed or had scheduled for 2022. The engine department said, we've got to get this engine out for 21, which will be our last, they thought was their last year. And they pulled all the stops out, and that was the engine that took Verstappen to the World Championship in 2021 with Red Bull in that famous and controversial Abu Dhabi climax. He hasn't got 6 years. He's a force of nature, Fernando Alonso. Maybe he could continue until he's 50 in Formula One if somebody would have him.
If anyone could.
But realistically, he hasn't got that sort of time. So what does he do? No one's going to want the car in terms of the driver, so he's probably safe on that front.
Well, I mean, we could talk all day about the career moves of Fernando Alonso and how many more championships he should have to his name. But one point that I thought after Melbourne and even throughout testing was Max Verstappen was openly being courted by Toto Wolff and Mercedes last year. Do you think he will regret not jumping ship?
Well, if he isn't regretting it already, I think the thing is he couldn't jump ship, or it would have been very difficult. There was a contractual clause in Max Verstappen's contract that he stroked the team satisfied at the break point. He'd think he needed to be third in the championship, which he was. So he couldn't have left without some kind of huge financial compensation situation going on. There was no contractual get out for him. This year there might be. And I think the more interesting question, probably, than going back and saying what coulda, woulda, shoulda, is what happens this year.
Absolutely.
George Russell could be 1996 all over again. George Russell could be winning the championship, cantering away with the championship, and Toto Wolff could decide to sign Max Verstappen instead.
Does that mean that George Russell eventually joins us in the 5 Live commentary box at one stage?
Maybe. Just in case people don't know, the 1996 references to Damon Hill, who that exact situation happened to at Williams. He was romping away with the 1996 championship, and Williams...
And Andrew Benson broke the story.
I broke the story. Williams dumped him for Heinz-Harald Frentzen, and anyway, let's not digress on that story again, but it was quite a remarkable situation.
It will be interesting to see how it unfolds, but I feel like we didn't get a proper look at what Max Verstappen had. Hadjar was massively impressive, I thought, and I think the stat is that he's the first Red Bull driver to get inside the top 10, qualify into Q3 on debut since Max Verstappen didn't have a very long race before having to pull up to the side of the road, but already kind of proving, and obviously we'll need to see this on a consistent basis, Sam, but already kind of proving that he's the guy that Red Bull he'd been needing. When Max Verstappen is, for whatever reason, not in the fight, they got another car there.
Absolutely, but he needs to deliver on a consistent basis, because looming in the background now is Arvid Lindblad. So, Red Bull have got this constant conveyor belt of young talent that they bring into Formula One, and then if you don't deliver, you're out. It's wild how many drivers they've got through, but I do think that in Isaac Hadjar, they've got some stability. They've got somebody there that can at least give Max Verstappen some consistent data that can challenge him at times and that can bring the car forwards.
Lindblad is actually managed by one of your Formula E colleagues, isn't he?
Ollie Rowland.
Mr.
Ollie Rowland, yeah.
And I think I saw Lindblad out in Jeddah for the Formula E race there.
He was.
Will he be able to learn a lot from what Rowland is able to tell him in Formula E and see?
In parts, I think, with potentially the brake shapes that might now go on in Formula One being different to what I think they have been in the past. In the past you would brake right on the limit of where you needed to brake. Now, in terms of recuperating energy, the style will be slightly different, a bit softer at the beginning, and a prolonged braking period to maximise your recuperation of the energy. But Ollie's there more as a manager / mindset. Ollie's been a world champion now in Formula E. He's been in and around many different paddocks, and I think he's very good at keeping Arvid Lindblad on a level. Not letting him float off into hyperspace with his head, because he's now an F1 driver, but he's there as a mate to pick him up if he's feeling a little bit low. Just being there as his big brother, essentially. I think that's really, really critical.
It's a really interesting story, actually, isn't it, Sam? Because I think Oliver Rowland picked Lindblad up when he was really quite young, didn't he?
When he was karting.
Yeah, set up a karting team for him. And in that first year of that karting team, with Ollie Rowland running it and Arvid Lindblad driving it, they won whichever championship they were in. And he's mentored him, managed him ever since. I was a little bit annoyed. I never got, by the way, to talk to Ollie Rowland when I did that Lindblad interview.
No, I know.
You
put me in such an awkward position, because
were you trying to get? Oh, hang on, Perez radio.
Hey, Sam.
Okay, nothing really important there about Perez.
There's very rarely anything important about Perez, but
brutal.
I knew what was going on, and I couldn't tell you. Yeah. So sorry.
Well, hang on. What's the context here?
I knew that Arvid had signed for Racing Bulls.
Okay.
Way before it broke, because I'd obviously spoken to Ollie, and that was out there. Andrew
I
wanted
knew
to
be honest, but anyway.
I knew before.
He can't stand the fact that you might.
No,
not that. That's not what I meant.
But I couldn't. And obviously it hadn't been announced, and then Andrew wanted me to speak to Ollie about it, and Ollie didn't want anybody to know about it until Racing Bulls had put the press release out there. And anyway, it's done now. He's a Racing Bulls.
The heavy hand of journalism.
So what happened was I wasn't trying to use Sam to break the story. I wanted to speak to Ollie Rowland to do a profile of Arvid Lindblad, because the office were asking me for one quite justifiably. And I thought I'll do it through Sam, I'll try and do it through Red Bull. I wasn't trying to shortcut any announcement, because everybody in Formula 1 knew it was going to be him. It wasn't anything special about me knowing before the announcement. But yeah, it didn't happen. And then later in the winter, I was going to try and talk to Ollie Rowland to do a kind of profile piece as well. But in the end, that just turned into an interview, which was very nice, even if I say so myself. He was very engaging and a bit cautious until he started talking about his family background. You can read about it on the BBC Sport website still. But he was very, very interesting on his family background and, his origins from his mum. Her family comes from India, his dad's from Sweden. And also what he learned about hard work, and because they're quite well off now. They live in Virginia Water, but obviously they've worked very hard to get themselves in that position, the family. So he seemed a very grounded and humble guy. I quite liked him.
Yeah, we're doing some catch-ups with him throughout the course of the year on the Checkered Flag podcast. Let's hear from Piastri.
Both cars have had that snap quite regularly.
Yeah, they're going into turn 1, the McLarens, and the rear end stepping out. What I want to know about Lindblad, Harry, I saw the clip of you talking to him in Melbourne. What's his nickname? Because he definitely
has one. I think by the time I've got 4 more sort of slots with him throughout the year. So by the end, I want to know.
You've got to ask.
I want to know the nickname. By the
I'm
end.
going to ask Ollie about this.
Yeah,
as
see
well.
if we can get Roland on it. I'll tell you what. Pub quiz question for you. Arvid Lindblad became the first Red Bull Junior driver to score a top 8 finish on debut since. Any guesses? Any takers?
Max Verstappen?
No,
I guess.
No, not Max
Sebastian
Verstappen.
Vettel?
Oh no! You've raised him a fair bit over the years.
Sebastian Buemi.
Sebastian Buemi.
Not the greatest recommendation
2009.
in terms of Formula 1 future success. I mean,
No, but arguably Buemi and Alguersuari had a bit.
Well,
of a
the wheels
rough
fell off in
time.
China, didn't they?
They did. That's why I thought nice little Buemi reference. That's what most people remember China for.
So Lewis Hamilton on the softs. He's now done 3 push laps on that same set of softs, and he's just done his fastest time with a 1:34.3, 2/10 behind Russell. So Ferrari potentially in the fight. I mean, George Russell is a little bit up the road. Kimi Antonelli actually had multiple laps towards the beginning of this session that were scuppered because of virtual safety cars, where he was purple in the first 2 sectors.
I would say, Sam, it's looking quite encouraging generally. It's only first practice, but the gaps between the teams are much smaller than they were in Australia. Russell a couple of tenths ahead of Hamilton, Leclerc right there with Hamilton on the medium tyre. Piastri only 0.38 behind Russell, Norris a bit behind Piastri, but that does suggest that things are a little bit closer than they looked in Melbourne.
Update on Carlos Sainz. There's apparent data issue that the Williams were looking into, but he is heading out now, and he is indeed out on the circuit with 22 minutes and 33 seconds to go, having not done any laps up until this point. So Sainz and Williams on the back foot as we're getting a look at Isaac Hadjar making his way through to turn 6, downhill braking. He's got a Ferrari in front of him that goes deep, trying to get out of the way, and Hadjar also finds himself carrying quite a lot of speed and trying to slow it all down in time. Runs a bit wide at the apex and locks up the front left tyre.
And the graining on that front left, so effectively that tyre is so unhappy, and I think that's due to effectively turn 1 and turn 12/13, 2 areas of the circuit where that front left tyre is under enormous strain, and then it basically scars the surface of the tyre, and there's no real way of bringing that back. Once it happens, that's there, and that's going to be very tricky to get around this weekend.
Yeah, this track's notorious for graining. It's what they call a front limited track. Sam, do you want to explain what that is?
Effectively where you can overheat and scar the surface of a certain tyre or a certain axle. There are some tracks that are rear limited where it's more traction based, where the issue is overheating the rear tyres or loss of grip on the rear axle. Here it's on the front axle, predominantly that front left tyre.
Well, I think just having a little listen into all of the various team radios, everybody complaining about tyres right now with 21 minutes on the clock. Russell quickest, a 1:34.169 on the medium tyre. Lewis Hamilton, having put on the softs, has now come into the pits. Quickest lap time was 2/10 slower than Hamilton. Leclerc is third, then it's Piastri and Antonelli the top five. Behrman sixth ahead of Norris. Gasly, Lawson and Ocon make up the top 10. The two Red Bulls of Hadjar and Verstappen, 11th and 12th. Hulkenberg's Audi is 13th ahead of Colapinto, Bortoleto and Albon in 16th, with Bottas in the Cadillac 17th ahead of Alonso. Lindblad, who's pulled to the side of the road early doors, down in 20th now. Stroll crosses the line to put his Aston Martin up into 18th ahead of Alonso. Perez 21st, and the sound of Carlos Sainz is what you can hear on his way to setting a first lap time of the session. So Carlos Sainz then, who didn't really have any kind of impact in the race last weekend, neither Williams really, and it's a bit of a as he backs out of it actually, so he's not going to set his first proper competitive lap time. I mean, this is a really underwhelming start for Williams, who I think we were expecting, based on last year, Sam, to maybe be best of the rest and make that jump to try and get on the coattails of the top four. Yeah, we thought that with the leadership of James Vowles, with the trajectory that they were having as a team as a whole, we thought 2026, they were gearing up to having a really decent season. And Australia was disappointing. I don't think we can quite count them as as this as being a rubbish year. We've had one race, so let's give them a bit of time and see what they can come up with for the rest of the year. We're now watching Franco Colapinto, another driver looking like he's struggling with that front left graining. The tyres looking do not look good. No, they do not. Bits of rubber flicking off them at the front. Yeah, but it is, as Andrew said, so front limited here. And what happens is that's not the tyre wearing out in terms of the amount of tread, but you're scarring the surface. Then you get this ripple effect on the tyre, which is that darker band that you can clearly see on some of these cars front left. That then is like little ripples on the surface that are effectively like scorched areas of what was nice, softer working rubber, and now it's this harder, drier, nasty rubber, and you're running on that, and it just gets worse and worse and worse. It doesn't sound fun for Franco Colapinto in the Alpine, down in 14th. Teammate Gasly's up in 8th. Gasly managed to nick a point last time out in Australia. Again, I think Alpine expected them to be a little better than they were. It was actually the Haas of Ollie Behrman who ended up as best of the rest, really. Quietly snuck up there. And he's doing the same again in free practice. Currently P6. He's just on an outlap at the moment, but that Haas working well for Ollie Behrman at the moment. Yeah, finished in 7th ahead of Lindblad, and Bortoleto was 9th for Audi last time out. And Audi, I think, were another of the teams, Sam, I don't know about you, but in that midfield, they quietly impressed me. They went about their business, they got points on debut, and let's not underestimate the task they're having to deal with either. Not only is it a brand new team on the chassis side, I know that they're still using the Sauber HQ and everything in Switzerland, but to build a brand new engine to kickstart the year, to get two cars competitive. We didn't see what Hulkenberg had in the end, but I felt that was a good start for Audi. Yeah, really solid. If you'd said to them at the beginning of the weekend, right, you're going to score points on your debut, they would have bitten your hand off. So Bortoleto drove a really solid race, and I know that the team there was extremely happy. Yeah, you can always hear wise words from team principal Jonathan Wheatley on the radio after a good or a bad result, actually. You've seen the Drive to Survive episode where they play Jonathan Wheatley off against Flavio Briatore in terms of different contrast in those two is unbelievable. When you've got Franco Colapinto and Pierre Gasly being sat down, being read the riot act. Have you ever been read the riot act in a sort of post-race briefing like that? That you care to divulge? I had a boss. I had a boss. Names, please. Well, I had a boss in GP2. I raced for a team called Russian Time one year, and I was a paid employee driver, which is quite rare in F2 GP2. I was paid to drive for them. And the TM day-to-day team boss was a guy called Timo Rumfeld, really good guy.
has run many championship-winning teams in the past, and it was a brand new team. But the guy that was there as the Russian spokesman for the team, the head of the team, brought the money in, was a guy called Igor Malpensa. He's no longer with us anymore. He passed away the year after I left the team, with a heart attack. Anyway, I just qualified on the front row for my first race, and he, the first thing, I'd never met him before. I said hello, and he told me that I needed to take my head off, take something out of my head, and then put my head back on again. So yeah, it was.
I think there's lots being unsaid here, isn't there, Harry?
This is
on
glorious.
so many different levels.
It was bizarre.
Yeah, I can't
really bizarre.
Are you going to write a memoir one day and we'll get
It'd
the
be
full
fun,
story?
yeah. Without, with the uncensored version, but it was quite remarkable.
But did it G you up? Did it fire you up?
I didn't really care, to be honest.
Yeah.
I just let it go through one ear and out the other, and
took the paycheck and off you went.
Yeah, exactly.
Classic. Sam Bird's GP2 exploits. It's a shame we don't have 2 more practice sessions to really get into that. Just 14 minutes and 38, 37, 36 seconds remain of this one and only practice session, Andrew.
Do you know what? We've got quite a gap between this practice session and sprint qualifying.
We'll get the full story.
I want the full story. I want the uncensored version of this story.
it's quite wild.
We've got a stoppage in the pit lane. It's Franco Colapinto who has come to a stop right in the fast lane, so cars are having to go around it. It's just before you get to the McLaren pit box, so Colapinto moving around in there, trying to hit some buttons on the steering wheel. The Alpine team are coming up to get him now and running up the pit lane, so perhaps a technical fault there on board the Alpine.
Absolutely. Now we're on board with him, you can really see just how angry that front left is looking on the Alpine, can't you, Harry? Sat there, the graining goes 3/4 of the way across that front left. Effectively, when with the camber of the tyre, it's that inside shoulder going out, working its way outwards, that is the affected area of the tyre.
Would not pass an MOT test, that tyre, that's for sure. As Alpine, they're now running back because I think Franco's got going again and he's whizzed past them, so they've run up
Back
half
you
the
go,
pit lane,
chaps.
and that's a real shame for Alpine because they are right at the end of the pit lane and they were almost there, and now they're getting their steps in at least and running back to it.
Absolutely, but with the air quality out there in China, that would have been a real struggle.
That would have been tough. Let's hear Colapinto. This is him in the pits. Nothing drastic. It just winds down, doesn't it? Just by the McLaren pit.
It's like
box.
he lost all drive while in first gear, and then it clunks to a halt. So
did he just run out of
No, I mean,
battery? But you can't, because this comes back as George Russell's going quicker now. He's on the
quicker.
soft.
He's 6.5 tenths up
He
on
has
everybody.
stuck on the soft tyre though. But
yeah, but
it's
Lewis
impressive.
Hamilton was on a set of softs.
And it took him a few laps to actually
Absolutely.
get to within 2 tenths, didn't it? But Russell's making his way down the back straight now. I think, Andrew, you mentioned this, and it was just to do with the poor starts that we saw from both Mercedes, with George Russell saying we didn't have any battery by the time we took the start. And George Russell made a very interesting point. There's a weird quirk of the rules, isn't there, going on where the start-finish line is and where you line up on the grid if you're either side of it.
Yes, so there's in Australia, because not all tracks have the start line and the finish line in the same place. And what happened in Australia was that basically there's a harvest limit on the formation lap, like there is on every lap. But the people at the front of the grid, their sort of practice start off the grid was counted in their energy limit for the formation lap. And then they found it really hard to get their battery charged up over the remainder of the lap, whereas the drivers a bit further back, I don't know exactly where the cut-off point was, their practice start happened technically on the previous lap. So then they crossed whenever the finish line was after having done their practice start, and that then allowed them their energy reset, their energy recovery capability reset, so they were able to recover the energy they needed for the start. There are ways around it, and I'm talking to Mercedes. They don't believe it's going to be a problem in China in the same way that it was in Australia. I mean, it does beg the question. Obviously Russell was on pole, but Charles Leclerc, for example, was only 4th on the grid, and I think the finish line was behind him too, and yet he did manage to recover enough energy and to get a good start to get into the lead at the first corner. So that was the situation.
Interesting. Another intriguing technical complex that everyone's having to get to grips with this in this new era and this new regulation cycle. Let's have a listen to what happened to Lewis Hamilton coming around the final corner, turns it into the left-hander, runs out on the curb, but no problem there. Is it just getting a look at the tyre and the graining going on that soft tyre, or did he kick up a bit of gravel on the rear right?
No, it was fine, Harry.
Yeah,
no issues there. The biggest issue for them right now is that Lewis Hamilton is 1.4 seconds off the pace of George Russell. Mercedes at the moment out in a league of their own. 1/10 between Russell and Antonelli, but then a gap back to Charles Leclerc of 7/10. So right now, Mercedes the class of the field here in China.
Yeah.
Beginner's error there. I didn't turn my mic on. It's the same gap basically as Australia. Charles Leclerc's just finished his own qualifying simulation run on the soft tyre, and he is the best part of 8/10 behind Russell, which is pretty much exactly what they were in Melbourne. Here's Hamilton's radio.
Give me a plan, mate.
Yeah.
I don't know where I am in the session.
So you are P3, still P3. Now Mercedes managed to use the soft. They are 1.3 seconds ahead of us.
It was looking a bit better the lap, but lost it at the end.
Lewis Hamilton there asking for a plan, being told what the situation is.
Interesting that he didn't react to that 1.3 seconds. I think some of that for Hamilton is that he's been on those soft tyres for quite a while. The track's been improving. He set his best time several laps into a run on the soft tyres, so there's definitely more potential for him. Charles Leclerc, different question. He's just done that one lap on the soft, same as Russell, and as I say, he's nearly 8/10 behind. I don't know why the time screen, by the way, just a small point. He's 0.792 seconds behind. Why does it say 0.7 on the abbreviated screen? It should say 0.8, shouldn't it?
The track is definitely ramping up, though. I'm looking at Pierre Gasly in the Alpine. We've got a load of mini loops that viewers either watching on TV or obviously if you're on the radio can't see, but the mini loop suggests that Pierre Gasly's gone purple in 2 of the first 5 or 6 mini loops in sector 1. He's going green in every other sector, currently in P8. This could put him ahead of potentially both McLarens and up to around P5, which for an Alpine would be a very strong lap. I don't know what's happening in sector 3 now. Doesn't look like he's improving in sector 3.
Lando Norris is on a flying lap at the moment as well, and actually he's going purple. He was very nearly purple in the first sector, Norris. That's fastest of all, the purple on the timing screens. George Russell, by the way, increased his gap. He's now 0.858 ahead of Leclerc with a second run on the soft tyres.
Behrman up to 5th in the Haas. Quick runs coming in then. Gasly does improve, but that final sector dropped off. He gets up into 7th in that Alpine. Lando Norris still out there, just making his way round turn 13 now and onto the back straight. This is the sound of the reigning world champion who finished in 6th last time out in Australia. Doesn't have the car, doesn't have the engine to be battling for race victories right now. Team working hard to try and shed some weight and understand the Mercedes power unit they have in the back of that car better. One final corner, clips the inside curb for Lando Norris, steadies the car nicely to the line and jumps up to 4th place, but 9/10 down on the quickest lap time of a 1:32.7 set by George Russell's Mercedes.
Yeah, we were on about Lewis Hamilton, weren't we? He is a little bit out of place. I do think he's got the pace to be in and around where Charles Leclerc is. You have to go back to the beginning of the session where he had that lock-up and spin at turn 6. Now, that's put him slightly off plan because he would have had to have come in earlier to change from that set of mediums because they would have been rattling his teeth around. And at 41 years old, I don't know whether he's got veneers or fillings, but got more than Arvind Lindblad, that's for sure. He moved on to the softs earlier than what he would have wanted to, let's put it that way.
Yeah, it's always a difficult session, this one, on a sprint weekend, when you only get one practice, trying to work through the programme as best you can. And for the two Red Bulls, well, they are now out on the soft tyre. Max Verstappen making his way to the final corner now. Personal best in the first and the middle sector. Let's see where this pushes him. He's down in 13th at the moment. Jumps up to 7th ahead of, actually Piastri hasn't done a soft tyre run yet, so he's actually behind his main rivals. He's behind Behrman by just under a tenth of a second. Verstappen up to 7th spot. Piastri is now going on that soft tyre.
So, interestingly, Piastri, same lap profile as Norris. First sector, pretty much matching the Mercedes. And then for Norris, at least, for the rest of the lap, somehow he drained a second over just 2/3 of the lap. I'd like to see the telemetry to show me where that's happening.
Yeah, that'll be fascinating, won't it? I think some of that is to do with weight, which then they can hold on to the car, the tyre can hold on. Oh, and he's gone deep there into turn 11, which will compromise 12 and all the way down the straight.
Look at that. So here we go. So Piastri was 0.3 down at the end of the second sector, and just coming onto the straight, he's already 6 tenths. He's lost 3 tenths just coming onto the straight. Now, I don't know whether that was a driving error or a deployment situation. But it does go to show just how much McLaren are losing to Mercedes. Still losing. It looks like Piastri's time is going to be better than Norris's, but he's draining time all the way round this final sector. So down the straight, onto the finish line, he finishes 3rd. He's 0.7 behind, so he's actually ahead of Leclerc behind the Mercedes 1-2. But 7 tenths basically in the last 2/3 of the lap. So like Norris was a second. There's a lot for McLaren to learn there, obviously.
Well, if you're carrying an extra few kilos, that's multiple tenths per lap. Plus, you don't understand the deployment. Like Mercedes, this track as well, as we've said, very heavy on that front left tyre. If you're carrying extra weight and expecting the front end to stick around the whole circuit, it's not going to do that with extra weight.
Just over 3.5 minutes remaining. Albon improves up to 13th. Sainz follows him up to 14th. So on the pace of his teammates straight away is Carlos Sainz, who has been confined to the garage. Norris is back out there again, but not finding a huge chunk of time. Gabriel Bortoleto in the Audi. Sound you're hearing now around the final corner to the line for the Brazilian, up into 13th spot, about 3 tenths behind his teammate Nico Hülkenberg. Hadjar's out there having stuck on the soft tyre. Norris does improve in the final sector, but stays 5th in his McLaren as Hadjar, in his second season in Formula One, having had a brilliant rookie year, getting on the podium at the Dutch Grand Prix, getting the call up to Red Bull for this year. Top 3 qualifying in his first effort for Red Bull. The race didn't pan out that way, but so far seems to be showing similar pace to Max Verstappen, but not on that lap. Down in 14th, 2.4 seconds adrift. Max Verstappen up in 8th, 1.8.
Looked conservative, didn't it, in the final sector there? I thought he looked a little bit early on the brakes in 14. Didn't really look comfortable with the car. Took 2 stabs at turning in to both 14 and 16. So a little bit of room to improve for Isaac Hadjar.
Just looking at the back, and the other thing, Sam, I was supposed to mention was, of course, we've got an extra team on the grids this year.
Cadillac, we haven't mentioned them.
We haven't mentioned them. It's because they're sort of just, they're circulating, they're getting on with their business. Bottas down in 19th, Perez, though, 20th, but I think he had some issues, certainly with his data on the radio, the one time we heard from him.
Well, yeah, he's currently stuck in the pits. He's 22nd, 6.5 seconds off the pace, even behind Lindblad, who stopped after a couple of laps of the session. And
I don't know about you, but it was great to see Perez finish the race. It was great to see them run their first race. It's a huge effort. It's a year since they really cobbled that entry together. It's a massive undertaking, but I think Australia also highlighted it is a huge hill to climb for Cadillac.
Massive. Every team that's come in as a new team, okay, but Haas is probably the only one in recent history that's come in and done a reasonable job from the get-go as a brand new, completely brand. I don't think we can say that Audi is a brand new team.
No, but I actually would also kind of half discount Haas because they bought as many parts as they could from Ferrari.
Right? So you look at what in 2010 we had a trio of new teams come into Formula One because the grid desperately needed bolstering up, but all three in their first year were
barely able to make 107%.
Yeah, and at times didn't. There always Charles Leclerc off at the final corner, Harry.
Yeah, got the back end stepped out coming through the final corner, ran into the gravel, managed to gather it all up and rejoin as Piastri now enters the pool of smoke left behind by the gravel, but Leclerc managed to keep it pointing in the right direction, but the lap falling away then for the Monegasque in that final corner.
2 decent laps from Piastri there. He's actually matched and bettered his previous laps. So the softs are able to do multiple laps, which is really good. Cadillac, it's going to be a struggle, isn't it, this season? And everybody there that's involved in the project knows and understands that. A lot of people actually from the McLaren Formula E team moved over to that project, so they were taking people from here, there and everywhere just to get the project up and running,
including the technical director or chief technical officer Nick Chester.
Absolutely.
Who was previously at Renault F1, by the way.
Just getting another look at Charles Leclerc bouncing his Ferrari over the gravel as he rejoins the track. That is the clock counted down to 0. Lando Norris though is gonna get one final lap in. He's coming round to the final corner now. Personal best in the middle sector. Keeps it neat and tidy. Round the final corner. Sees the checkered flag. Improves his time to go third fastest. Half a second adrift of the front runners, which are once again the Mercedes drivers. George Russell quickest ahead of Kimi Antonelli. About a tenth between them. The 1:32.741, the quickest that time. Then it's the 2 McLarens, Norris ahead of Piastri, Leclerc and Hamilton, the top 6. Behrman takes the flag in 7th, looking strong again is the Haas ahead of Verstappen. Hülkenberg got the Audi up inside the top 10 with Gasly rounding out the first 10 runners. And Hadjar in the other Red Bull down in 15th, not looking like he's really going to improve on this final lap either. He'll come around the final corner and see the checkered flag. Does improve in the final sector, but only up to 13th behind Bortoleto and Lawson. Ocon 14th ahead of Colapinto with Albon the top 16. Sainz, who didn't get barely any running in the end, but did get out there, 15 laps on the board, just behind his teammate in 17th. Alonso in 18th ahead of Bottas, Stroll. Lindblad with issues, pulled to the side of the road, only got 6 laps to his name, and Sergio Perez down in 20th with only 22nd, I should say, with only 13 laps on the board.
So George Russell topping another session. Too early to say that he's champion-elect this year, Harry, but he's certainly got his head around these regulations and the battery management so far much quicker than everybody else. I've been listening to the note with the engines in Sector 3 as the session goes on. So when the drivers exit turn 13 flat out down towards 14, George Russell is able to continue accelerating and using the battery much later than every other driver. There's 2 advertising boards by the side of the circuit, and they're separated by probably 150 meters, 200 meters. Everybody else is at the first board when you hear the note change for some form of deceleration when they run out of battery pack. George Russell is at the second board. So the amount of time that he must gain in that section is enormous, as we see Ollie Behrman having a very bizarre spin coming out of turn 3.
Yeah, quite slow speed as well for Behrman, and lucky for the Aston Martin of Lance Stroll, just avoided that. But towards the end of the session, Behrman getting on the throttle, coming out of turn 3, and then, yeah, the back end just spins round on it.
So weird. It didn't look like the car was under any strain, or he wasn't pushing, so really strange.
We're going to see some practice starts as well as Charles Leclerc lines up on the right side of the grid, half the grid, actually a little bit more than that, almost 3/4 of the grid in a shadow that's cast by the main grandstand. So that will have an effect as well that the teams will be taking into account in terms of a temperature difference and a grip difference as well. That's the sound of the Ferrari engine revving up as he just gets ready to take that start, and off he goes. We're not going to see the full one as Oscar Piastri, who is considering this as his first race of the year. He's forgotten that there was one last weekend after crashing out on the lap to the grid.
I bet he hasn't. I bet that will haunt him for a long time.
Well, that again, another interesting one. I mean, he does take. I don't think he's taking a sort of guilt for that one, even though he did say about an unexpected power surge from him, but that he experienced in that corner. But also said he took more curb than probably necessary, which saw him not start his home Grand Prix and the first race of the year. But that just about wraps things up then for the one and only practice session for the Chinese Grand Prix. Mercedes off to a frighteningly quick start with George Russell fastest, a 1:32.741, a 10th clear of his teammate Kimi Antonelli, with the two McLarens and the two Ferraris behind, with work to do. Thank you, Andrew Benson. Thank you, Sam Bird. We shall see you again in a few hours' time. 7:25 we're on air on Sports Extra, ahead of qualifying for the sprint. So there's no messing around. We get straight into it. Who will be on pole for the first sprint of the year? This has been an ING production for BBC Radio 5 Live.